Welcome back to 8 Cubes, the show where we discuss the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap. I'm KMBest, he's Lambie Series, and I feel bad for not wearing my glasses because otherwise we'd be dressed identically. We're going to start with Maverick, the card coming out next week, this week, in 2 days, in 1 day. I don't know when you're watching this. I'm guessing. This is a card that I think is the first of 3 probably pretty exciting releases. I thought Weapon H was going to be a pretty boring release. It ended up being fairly compelling. Maverick is a card I think is going to be a powerful and interesting release at 3/3 with an activate ability that gives its power to the next card you play. This is like a forge that you can save up like a Kamehameha, but baseline, it's just a card that says your brood has 15 power. Just that's the baseline here. That's what this card is doing with no other help needed in that context. And I think that's a pretty cool thing to do. Your brood is bigger. It really wants to do the Surfer thing typically of, I have all these cards that have buffs and they're good on rate with their buffs, right? Like this is a 3/6. You're pretty happy with that. But when you give the buffs to something else, like a Brood or a Captain Carter or even a Sebastian Shaw, you get extra multipliers on that buff. In the case of Brood, it's an X3. Captain Carter, usually an X2. Sebastian Shaw, usually an X1.6. But still, that's still reasonable multipliers to put on reasonable rate. And that's always been the ethos of decks like this with cards like this.
Yeah, this card. Okay, so the funny thing about this is that when I first saw this card, I was like, okay, how are we gonna buff it? And I thought of Gwenpool and stuff like that. Then KM was like, it's just insane with Brood. And I'm like, yeah, true. It's actually just you don't even need to think of buffing the card, right? Like it's just like making your Brood 15 power, which is insane. One more thing that this does, for Surfer deck specifically, which it's more of a niche interaction, but I feel like this will happen a lot with this card, is that you can kind of draw your deck out of order per se. Because normally what you do with Surfer is that you want to Surfer on the like final turn to buff everything, right? But let's just say you draw Surfer, you haven't drawn your Brood yet. You can kind of like Surfer buff whatever's on the board, including this. And then if you eventually draw your Brood, then you can still buff the Brood with the buffed Maverick thereafter. So it's like it allows your Surfer deck to not draw so perfect and still do like perfectly strong things like at the end of the game. So I think that's one thing that has it going for it. But that's like the additional like good point. Like at the core, this is just a very, I would say, very staple, most likely gonna be staple Surfer card going forward.
Yeah. I feel like this is a card that will probably be core to the deck. I feel like this is a card that is pretty interesting. I also just sort of think that I don't really know that it will ever exist outside of that context. Like Surfer is just so totalizing for any kind of like buff synergy 3-drop. Like you see, for example, one of the few buff synergy 3-drops that has come out that has not been a Surfer card is Superior Spider-Man. And that's largely because of when those buffs get applied. Like Surfer's not really doing that stuff that early. This is a card that actually just wants to be part of what Surfer is doing. Like that's the problem, is like it really wants to be played with all the other cards that Surfer goes with. And I think while Superior Spider-Man sort of escaped containment and is not a buff card, he doesn't go in a buff deck. He goes in decks that create green power with scalers for the most part. That's what he's synergizing with. This card, I don't see having that same kind of like escape velocity path. It's going in Surfer, and I kind of wonder if that's it. The other thing this card does that's like at least nominally pretty interesting, it works pretty well with Fallen One just off rip, right? You could turn this into just 3 energy if you feel the need to without putting any other effort into Fallen One. 3 energy off of a Fallen One with this gives you 9 on the final turn of the game. It's a pretty consistent way to make sure that that guy's actually contributing to what you're doing. I'm not saying this is like the greatest Fallen One card ever, but I do think that like if we're looking for a secondary use case for where this guy is going to go outside of Surfer, which I feel like you could probably, you don't even really need to watch content to be like, this card goes in Surfer. You could probably figure that one out for yourself. And if you aren't figuring it out, approximately every YouTuber who talks about this card will probably tell you the same thing. I do think Fallen One is maybe like, oh, I didn't think about that. That might be a place that this card could also go. In light of that discussion, I think probably the most educational thing I can do for talking about this card is talk about why Surfer hasn't been a big part of the metagame, because that's going to inform this card and that's going to inform what's going on. There are a couple of baseline reasons here, but if you want to zoom out really, 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 really far, the best answer you can get The most accurate answer in the shortest amount of words is going to be it doesn't make enough points. That's the biggest answer you can get in the shortest amount of words. Surfer doesn't do enough points to be able to be strong in the current metagame. It is not as good at mixing in points and tech. And indeed, it is actually not just overshadowed by other decks that do points and tech, but a lot of points and tech decks right now are leaning pretty heavily on Shadow King, which is really good against what Surfer is doing generally. Even though it's a 3-cost card, like Surfer's a buff deck, it's just sort of in the position of a zombie deck in this situation where the points are good, but there's just such a clear weakness to Shadow King and a general lack of ability to run your own Shadow King that when you see what the zombie decks have become, they've just gotten rid of all their green power. They're like a Nihilist, Sentry, Cannonball, Mercury decks now. That's what the zombie decks are doing, so they could be Shadow King decks. Surfer doesn't have that ability. If you have to be a Shadow King deck, you're just not playing Surfer. And that's largely the biggest thing that this card is going to run into. About this time last year, Galacta came out, and the biggest thing she did was make Surfer better by just saying, in every game, I'm going to be able to stat check you. I have the ability to stat check you. I'm going to make it happen. And I think this card adds a similar dynamic, but I don't know if it's as strong. In fact, I strongly doubt that it's as strong. And the deck really needs something that's just like, I am playing with the big boys again.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see if like the new edition of the Maverick can like make it a bit more like potent in the meta. But the problem with that is also obviously Maverick is green power, and like Shadow King is like the killer of all green power. The thing about like Surfer is like I think you mentioned the zombie deck shifting away from some of their green power. I think that's a very big like important point because you want your base non-green stats to be big, right? And with Surfer, your base non-green stats is like what 3, 4, sometimes 5. In the past there was Gladiator which was 8, but like you can't run 12 Gladiators and then Surfer, so like it doesn't really work, right? Like your base power once you get hit by the Shadow King is just that your entire lane just goes poof, and like if you know how Surfer works, I think the entire location is practically green power at its finest, right? And then it just goes gone with Surfer when Shadow King drops. So yeah, I think this deck. The problem with this deck is also that like cannot run a lot of tech cards, right? If you think about it, like it's not like you can fit every good tech card in the deck. Shadow King is difficult to fit in the deck. I guess to a certain extent, Juggernaut is also a bit difficult to fit into the deck. But like Cosmo is fine, but at the same time, then you cannot play on reviews in the Cosmo location as well. So it's a bit rigid when it comes to fitting tech. And we always talk about like the best decks in the game, aka previously Victoria Hand was always the best at using the tech card that was most premium for the meta. So Surfer is it's a bit tough for Surfer to fit all those things in and still have the power output to match the rest of the meta.
I think rigid is a good word here, where
Yeah.
what kept Surfer around when it was last good was Juggernaut Negasonic Cosmo. Two of those cards are no longer surferable, and so you
Yep.
just end up with a deck that is just doing points that had points in interaction, but doesn't
too
really
honest.
necessarily have
It's
access
too
to
honest,
them.
and then it loses to the
Yes.
best tech card in the game.
Yeah, it's just doing straight up, here's a bunch of points. I hope you can't beat it or interact with it in any meaningful way.
But you
That's
can.
the problem. That's the biggest problem the deck has. Speaking of like relatively honest points, but in such a number that it's still kind of functional. Weapon H was pretty surprising to me in that like I came away from Weapon H week feeling like I could be a discard main if it didn't involve me having to play so much of the
Discard
card
main.
Gambit. I could do it. Like I think that would be a fun thing to be. Like I could
He
just
used
like
to be a zoom in, guys.
yeah, like I've been playing so much dumb guy Marvel Snap recently. I've been playing a lot of discard. I've been playing a lot of ongoing, and I don't know, like the ongoing deck I've been playing is like Madam Web, Cosmo, Juggernaut. Maybe it's not fair to call that a dumb guy deck. Fine, but I'm playing a lot of this. I'm playing a lot of ongoing, playing a lot of ramp. I tried some Scar, just some real dumb guy Marvel Snap from me recently, and I've been enjoying it. It's been a nice way to interact with the game since I've been playing mostly on mobile recently. And I got to tell you, dumb guy decks on mobile, that's a slapper. That's a really good experience. Weapon H
Yeah, I mean,
is better than I thought.
yeah, I mean, like if you think about it, the ramp deck that is premium in the meta right now, you cannot talk about ramp when you talk about dumb guy decks. Like it's not
Yeah.
exactly a dumb guy deck, but it's a I'm on the toilet deck. It's my favorite title, by the way. I'm on the toilet. But like some of these like good decks in the meta right now are so I'm on the toilet decks. Like you just like don't really need much thinking. You just go through the motions literally, and then like just get it done. The weapon age is very interesting to me because like I remember last week when we were discussing it, we were a little bit more iffy, right? We were wondering like if this actually fits into like more than just a Modok deck. And clearly I think it can be played without even playing Modok, honestly. So I feel like the card is good. Like I've always liked these kind of cards. Like I would say Mockingbird-esque cards. This is kind of like that, right? Like you just play stuff and then stuff naturally reduces the cost of the big guy, and then the big guy comes down for 1, 0, 3, which is fine, is 14 power. So like I really think that like this weapon age really surprised me a little bit. Like it's way more playable than I like this style of card and I'm glad that it's more playable than I initially thought.
The only thing I'll quibble with here is I feel like to me Modok deck is a figure of speech, right? Where it's
Okay.
not like literally the deck has Modok in it, but it like when I'm using that, I'm referring to like the discard archetype with Apocalypse, right? Like that's what I'm talking about when I say
Mm-hmm.
Modok deck, because it would have been inconceivable that we were cutting Modok from these decks before Weapon H, and then like here I am, my Weapon H deck doesn't even have Modok in it. I I I mean, granted, that has nothing to do with Weapon H. It's entirely down to Zombie Power Man. But
Hmm.
I also don't even know if it's the right decision. But again, like it's just like, oh, maybe I should have updated my heuristic, my phrasing heuristic there, right? Maybe Modok deck is the wrong way to say it. But here's the thing: if you call them discard decks, even though that's to me what I would call them, someone in the comments will always be like, "What are you talking about when you say discard is bad? I'm playing so much Hello right now." That's not discard. It's a different deck, but that happens every single time. 100%
Okay,
of the time.
honestly, like wait, hold up. Do people actually call like Hela a discard deck? I have not once in my Marvel Snap
I have
career.
gotten that exact comment multiple times when I'm like, discard sucks, but when Hella is good, I'll be like, discard sucks. And I'll be talking about like the discard deck, and they'll hear it and they'll be like, Cam's the
But
fucking
Hela's
idiot.
fine, they'll say, but Hela is fine, right? But no, Hela has never been about like Hela could be about destroy and like my point is that like the mechanic that triggers the Hela is the discarding, but like she's not powerful because you're discarding stuff. She's powerful because she's Hela. And you happen to have to discard things to make her good, right? It could have been
Yeah,
destroy, but they
the
just chose
real
discard.
Weapon H is Hella.
Yeah.
I wanted to do a bit of a retrospective on the precons. I think I've already talked about it. I don't want to just like tell you the same thing I already thought, but this is something that got prompted by I saw so many screenshots of people just like proudly saying I didn't play this Grand Arena game mode, right? And I know it really heightened my feeling that this Grand Arena game mode is something that is so clearly not for anyone who would ever make a Twitter account to post about Marvel Snap. Like
Yep.
it's almost
That's so
perfectly
correct, by the way.
designed. It's almost perfectly designed such that anyone who would hate the game mode is exactly the person who would talk about your game. And I don't like that doesn't sound like a strong decision-making process to me. That doesn't sound like something that I would be opting into. The fact that they continue to opt into this kind of thing, hot locations, precons, all things that the invested player base generally dislikes. Like, I'm not going to say every single invested player dislikes those things, but I would say it's a pretty constant and clear majority. This to me is indicative of Marvel Snap having a larger casual player base than I thought. Because there's really only one reason why you do that stuff. I guess reason number 2 being you're incompetent at your job and you work at second dinner. But reason number 1, the realistic actual reason, is they have data that shows that this happens, right? They have data that shows people play more on hot locations. The aggregate number of Marvel Snap games across the game probably goes up on a hot location day, despite every single person who has a Twitter account playing less, right? All of that is probably the same dynamic going on here. Unless, of course, you assume that they're just like really stupid, which, the average ask the team
Probably not.
question, there's probably a fair bit of that assumption going on. I just think that it's worth pointing that out. Like, if you watch my content, you are in the bubble of bubbles, the most bubble of all time. There are people on Twitter who I think of when I think of like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, right? There are certain accounts that I think of, and they're coming to mind right now, and I'm sure some accounts are coming to mind for you. And all of them also hated this game mode. You're in the bubble of bubbles when you listen to me. That's all I'm going to say. Is if you're listening to this content right now, you're probably not representative of the average Marvel Snap player. We know I'm not.
I mean, it's quite interesting because when you say that you are the bubble of like this kind of content, I can fully relate because I feel like I literally built my entire brand of streaming around being the bubble of like I'm the guy try harding conquest. Who does that? I mean, like it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Like the people that watch us right now, either long time listeners or like people that actually really super invested in Marvel Snap. It's really a very bit small like group of people already, and so I mean, obviously, I thank you guys for that, right? That's how we survive because you guys watch our bubble of bubble content. But like, I do think that like it's very true that I've known this for a long time. That like majority of Marvel Snap players are just more on the casual side, and obviously, since that's the case, they will definitely have to be targeting that group of people more than us bubble people, you know. But like, yeah, no, the precons one is really interesting. Like, I don't think I will ever be able to like bring myself to post precons content like, oh, check out my precons deck. Like,
I wanted to do a
why?
gag video that was like the 8 best decks for the new Grand Arena, and it was just talking
Oh, yeah,
about the
that'd be
precons.
hilarious, man.
I thought that would be really funny, but I also think it would get like 2 views because people would figure out the joke. They'd be like, "Ha," and then they'd click off the video, right?
No, they probably watch to see how you troll the entire 8 decks. I would
You have
watch
a
that.
much higher belief in my ability to carry a boring video than I do, I think. We've given out a lot of slops on this channel for cards that are just like C plus cards that, just don't really do much to the metagame. I want to take some time and give out some props for the card Chamber specifically. I think it was a really inspired choice to take this and say, we're going to actively make a ramp deck good in a couple of different ways, but this guy pushing ramp back into the metagame at exactly the same time as they finally change War Machine to be significantly better in the ramp
Mhm.
deck, and also with Chamber as a 5-cost card. I think that was just genuinely some really good work from them. Like, that is just
Agree.
a really cool, really good, really enjoyable deck to have be part of the metagame. I've got nothing bad to say about ramp. Fair Marvel Snap at its finest. And I think the most underrated thing about it is when you actually zoom in, one of the things that has happened is there haven't been a lot of good tech decks recently because tech has gotten so much more expensive. Ramp is doing kind of the RSM thing where it's like, okay, I have CGR, I have Enchantress, I have Legion. I've got my interaction in here. It's a dumb guy deck, but it's a dumb guy deck that plays the game of Marvel Snap rather than just putting points on the board. And I think putting points on the board is cool, but if it wasn't a deck that had that interaction, I don't think it would exist. Like, I just don't think that it would be a real deck without the fact that, say, Enchantress is doing double duty for it the same way it does in a Red Skull deck, right? Like, Enchantress is your I play this on Electro when I don't have the other things to play on Electro, right? Like, you're doing things, right? You have CGR, you have Legion, you have all these good big fives. And that is just, I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, it is naturally good enough based on the numbers. I think it's good enough based on the numbers and the interaction. And Chamber is a big part of supplementing that, allowing you to play these interactive cards.
Yeah, I mean, I've I've played my fair share of like simple and complicated decks, like complicated stuff like along lines of, like move related, bounce related kind of stuff as well, right? Like, and then there's this style of deck whereby I touch my heart. Like, if I had a choice, like, and this is the best deck in the game, I would definitely bring this kind of deck to the tournament personally. Because like the thing about this style of deck is that like it's not just like stats, right? Like you mentioned, it's stats, relevant stats with relevant like decision points that you can make, and also a lot of like very like strong snap conditions in the deck. Like for example, you go like ramp into a 5, right? The plethora of 5s in your deck is actually very different. Like what the each 5 will impact the game very differently depending on like which you choose to play on different locations and whatsoever. There's like vision stuff, there's Legion, there's like Cosmic Ghost Rider. Like each one like impacts the game state very differently, and you have like I guess I call this a toolbox. Right? It's literally a toolbox of 5s, right? Like I think the ramp deck right now is good because it's powerful and it's also a toolbox of 5s whereby your best turn 4 play, which is usually a 5, is varied big depending on like situation and opponent and location, you know. So I think like the fact that the ramp deck can do this really well, and then going back to the chamber point, which is chamber solves the early game issue of ramp. Ramp used to be like Jeff is the best 2 drop. Now your best 2 drop can go up to 9, 10, 11, whatever. Like it solves that like problem of like your early game, and then now there's like a very perfect curve whereby if you ramp into a 5 on 4, you just have so many options for the rest of the game.
Wanted to talk a little bit about the genre of deck that is Shadow King midrange, because I think that's just kind of where we are. Like when I look at the metagame, I see ramp decks, I see, Shadow King midrange decks, I see Jug Cosmo decks, and I see combo decks. And those are just sort of the four categories that I split things into. And honestly, Jug Cosmo might be a little bit of a fake category, like only at high infinite kind of thing. Like that might not be one of those things that trickles down. But the three categories of decks that definitely trickle down are ramp, which is to say points that do not get interacted with by Shadow King. SK midrange stuff, which is V Hand, which is the Annihilus, which is all of the like werewolf type of decks, that kind of deal. And then combo, which is actually like a very wide category right now because you basically pick a breakpoint of reliability or imagine a graph where the x-axis is reliability and the y-axis is point total, and you're just like picking the point on the graph that appeals to you the most, right? Like that's combo. With Shadow King, that's kind of like the dominant mid-range force here going into Chambers' release, and I think that's probably important context for him. This kind of mid-range deck, it's not just like, oh, Shadow King's amazing. It's honestly mostly that Shadow King is cheap. Like, the biggest thing driving these decks isn't Shadow King is just the most relevant tech card all of the time, because it's not true. But it's a 3/4, and when it is relevant, it wins a lane. And so you're just like, yeah, okay. Like, I'll be a Shadow King deck. I'll build to be a Shadow King deck. I'll make some sacrifices to account for allowing this card to be part of my game plan, because enough of the time it is going to be relevant that I would just play the 3/4 that says win a lane. And I think this is sort of a relic of the changes to other tech cards, right? If you could play 4/6 Enchantress, you probably would be. You can't play 5/8 Enchantress in those. If you could play old Shang-Chi, maybe you would. I don't know. Weirdly, I think Shadow King has better text than Shang-Chi right now.
Old Shang-Chi, I think, will not be very prevalent in the current meta as well, honestly. I think the thing about Shadow King is that, okay, the thing about if you think about stuff that like Shadow King can randomly hit compared to the stuff that Shang-Chi can randomly hit, Shadow King's like random usefulness is like at least 3 times more than I'm just throwing random numbers out there.
Yeah,
But
real statistical rigor went into that
Yeah.
analysis.
But Shadow King is just randomly more useful, right? Because there's like, I think, more instances of like random green power and random big guys on the board in the current state of the game, right? So I think like Shadow King is just one of those things, like it's kind of like best in slot in a sense whereby it's a 3-cost tech. I mean, it's a tech card, 3-cost tech card, and then it's also like, it's also just like it hits everything. Yeah, even if it hits like one slightly smaller green power guy, it's also like a 3/6 or 3/7 Shadow King in terms of like power level. It's fine, Shang-Chi could just miss completely more often than not. So I think Shadow King is just, I feel like not being able to play Shadow King in your deck sometimes is like a downside. That's why I think like most of these Shadow King mid-range decks are here, because they can just very conveniently fit Shadow King and like don't feel like it's a problem to just have this card in your deck.
What I'm struck by is how this has remained true despite the fact that a deck that has entered the metagame recently, the ramp deck, is so explicitly good against Shadow King and bad against Shang-Chi. Like, it is. That is a deck that on turn 5 will play just a guy that dies to Shang-Chi. It would be unimaginable 6 months ago. Unimaginable.
Does it really just die to Shang though? Like, just think of the fives,
have you ever had someone play a Fenris Wolf against you and you're playing ramp? You just stare at that card and you're like, oh god. Like, it is so bad. It is so bad, because it's like, oh man, if I play anything with stats, I'm risking the Shang. Even if I don't do that, they're gonna try to like do the 50-50 on it.
I mean, like, most of the Shangable stuff costs 6. The 5s are the utility, right?
No, but you're playing it on turn 5 because you ramped it.
All right, yeah.
Like, you're
you
playing
could play a 5-on-5, like a 5-on-4 and a 5-on-5, right?
But like, that's what I mean. Like, it's like it's forcing you out of playing just the existence of like the threat of a Shang-Chi. In a previous metagame, you just wouldn't have been able to build this deck. It just wouldn't have happened. Like, you just wouldn't be doing that, right? Like, I'm playing this deck, and my plan is to play First Steps Galactus into the Infinite. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Okay, all right, idiot. Like, that's how this deck would have gone over when everyone was playing Shang-Chi. And the fact that Shang is actually so good against that, especially because nobody's gonna play around it, right? Like, it just says blow up a big guy and you win that lane. And Shadow King is so ass against this deck. There's one target in the entire deck. It's Chamber, and that requires you to, like, manage priority correctly. The fact that Shang-Chi is still not in any decks is really notable in that context. Like, context has shifted away from Shadow King and towards Shang-Chi, and we're still on Shadow King because he's still just better.
Correct. And the thing to me is actually like my counter argument to this is actually if you look at the ramp deck, I really just think that like the fact that there's way more unshangable things than shangable things still makes Shang-Chi just like not worth playing. Right? Obviously the Galactus first steps and all that is painful to get hit by, but the fives with the utility or they don't get shanked, and they also probably are the ones that win you most of the games.
This one might be a little bit like niche high infinite, but Jug Cosmo decks are a thing right now. To me, the two main Jug Cosmo decks are both doing Madam Web Cosmo things, just because that's like a super disgusting thing to do. I do think that like there's a third secret Jug Cosmo deck, which we'll talk about in a second. The two main ones are the Iris Thing First Steps Batroc deck and the ongoing deck with that combination of cards in it. The big thing that's enabling them, though, is Superior Spider-Man is bringing back the old turn 6 Jug Cosmo kind of garbage, right? I think that's I think it's a cute little thing. I'm enjoying what it's been able to do there. I bring this up to say there's a third secret Jug Cosmo deck, and it's just Heimdall move that everyone just stopped playing when they nerfed a point of power off a Human Torch, but I'm pretty sure it's also still probably good.
Probably.
This is a genre of decks that probably exists mostly at high infinite because it's hard to play them. Like, it's just, these are hard to play decks. There's a lot of context involved, understanding what's actually going to happen in the game, i.e. if I think my opponent's going to reasonably fill up these lanes, I don't really have the ability to play Juggernaut. That's the biggest way to play around Juggernaut. I don't want to like get too out over my skis, but it does feel like a really good metagame right now when there are so many different ways to be interactive and also to not be interactive. I think that's just a really, really good spot to be in. But largely what I want to call out here is I've been really impressed with Superior Spider-Man letting this happen. That's the thing I want to call out here. I said when it came out that I felt like this was a sleeper. The kind of card that in 6 months, people are going to be like, I can't believe I didn't buy that guy. I am not saying we're getting there. It's only been 1 month, you know? But he keeps showing up and just being like, oh, yeah, this guy's like a really solid role player. And I just kind of envision that being his future forever. Like, he's just always going to be like, oh, yeah, I like this guy. He's letting me do cool stuff, you know?
Agree. Yeah, I actually super agree with that point. But I think one thing I want to bring up is something you mentioned at the start of this topic, which is Juggernaut. I was thinking Juggernaut, like since the for the longest time, it's always started from high infinite and then slowly trickled down. Like if you think of all the decks that like eventually had Juggernaut, or like the amount of Juggernauts you see, it always in the casual player base, you just never see it. But then like maybe like 1 week later, you see it starts trickling down from high infinite. It's because Juggernaut is one of those tech cards whereby it's very interesting because it's not like it's a tech card, but at the same time, it doesn't specifically like kill off any deck, but it just has the ability to win a lane. You know, it's like it's a tech for the lane.
Every deck.
Yeah, it's a Juggernaut's attack for the location, for the lane, not so much attack for a specific like power, like green power or like ongoing or whatever. So it's quite interesting. Like these kind of like lane tech, right? It's always started from high infinite and trickled down. Like Legion also sort of is like lane tech and then trickles down a little bit here and there. So just wanted to point it out because I find that like quite interesting.
I'm trying to think of a Hearthstone analogy where it's like this card is
high
really
level tech
strong.
that never sees play. Is that what you're trying to
it's
say?
really strong. It's not exactly tech, but it is just like this kind of thing that in its own context is just like impossibly good. I feel like it's got to be a rogue card. Like it's like it's
probably a rogue card.
It's got to be like, I don't know, prep. Like it's just one of those.
No. There's every rogue that runs prep, man. Prep is big.
Yeah, it's not prep. It's something.
I can't think of anything right now. So
like Yeah, that's it's like people still like sometimes I pay attention to Hearthstone and I'll see someone being like, I miss Lambie Rogue. I'll be like, oh yeah.
Holy,
Yeah.
holy. That was 3 years, man.
Yeah. That was what I mean, almost 4 years, right? It's about to be
Yeah, almost
2026. That
4
was
years. Like
2022.
2022, I believe.
Yeah. Last up is combo, which with the loss of move to the metagame, again, not sure that's based on power, but I think everyone was just really happy to stop playing that deck. Like I think what happened is like that deck got nerfed and people were just like, thank God I can put this down now. I don't feel like I have to play it. It still might be just as good. Like not like literally just as good in terms of output, but just as good in terms of positioning against the other decks. But luckily no one has felt the need to actually figure that out. Thank God.
Hmm.
It is a really open combo metagame. I've seen man spider decks. I've seen various forms of Hela. I've seen all of these sort of Mr. Negative type decks. A lot of different things you can do in the space that fundamentally are just, hey, you're playing a ramp deck, idiot. I have twice as many points as you. It's really hard to lose those games when those are happening, right? When you have a deck like ramp, you have a deck like V-Hand, you have these as like sort of the dominant modes of playing Marvel Snap. Those are probably decks 1 and 2 in the metagame in some order. Just have a deck that combos over the top of both of them because both of them have relatively limited output. That's a really good space to be in positioning wise. And there are a bunch of decks that can actually do that. And I think that's a really cool dynamic where not only is mid-range a little up in the air, still probably V-Hand, but combo is also a little up in the air because there are a bunch of decks that can hit those point ceilings.
Yeah, so actually, there's a lot. Like, I was just thinking that there's a lot of decks that just go over the Ram deck. And the Ram deck just cannot interact and just dies. But the problem with all these decks is that they're just naturally a bit more inconsistent, right? Like,
Yeah,
they just
because they
draw
can't
worse
be
on every.
on board. That's the big thing.
Exactly. Yeah, they
Like
like draw worse on average also. So yeah, that's
what
why I really think that like being taller than the Ram deck is actually not that difficult, right? But the problem is it's just how often you get to do that with your sort of more inconsistent deck. That's like my biggest issue.
the biggest thing driving them to inconsistency is an inability to be an onboard combo deck.
Yeah.
Because if you have to be a turn 6 combo deck, which you do, like the biggest thing that the tech cards in the rampant V-Hand decks do is say, you better not have some shit on board. I've
Yep.
got Cosmic Ghost Rider, I've got Enchantress, and I've got Shadow King. And those are the cards that you just like have to deal with, right? And so the best combo decks in this space are going to be combo decks that are entirely from hand. Because that's sort of like what the metagame is pushing you towards. Because if you do your shit on board, then you're going to get interacted with some of the time. And if you do your shit from hand, you're not getting interacted with it in any meaningful way right now. Nobody's playing a Mobius. It's happening. So, long story short, kind of a great Mr. Negative meta, kind of a great Fallen One meta. As long as what you're doing is turn 6, I'm winning the game, and the rest of the game, I'm not doing anything, it's viable. Which also speaks to this is part of why Jug Cosmo is showing up at High Infinite. Because all these decks are like, it's my turn 6 combo. No, it isn't. No, none of that is happening. No, yeah, you're not. No, stop it. It's not happening. You're not turn 6 comboing me. Get that shit out of here. That's
Yeah.
kind of like
Jack Cosmo is just so anti like turn 6 combo,
yep.
right? Like if you just think of from the perspective of Mr. Negative, I feel like Mr. Negative has been something that you can play for the last few months and be fine. Like it's a playable deck, right? Because Mobius is non-existent. But Jack Cosmo just says like it just says no, it's like Solemn Judgment from Hearthstone, like from
It's
Yu-Gi-Oh!
it's
Sorry.
not
Like
that
counter
good.
everything.
It's not
Yeah, you don't have
that
to pay half your
good.
health. There's no health, but like yeah, anyway.
I would pay half my health in a if they made
Yeah,
a
I
card
would pay
that
half my health to stop Mr. Negative from destroying me, that's
yes.
for sure. But
Yes. Yeah. If they made a card that was like you lose half the points of power on your board, but Solemn Judgment happened, yeah, you'd be like,
yeah,
yeah.
that's too broken,
Like,
man. It's
yeah.
a Alive level. That's like pre-nerf
Yes.
Alive level. It's just God says no. Like in Japanese, like Solemn Judgment really I think translates to God says no or something like that. Like in the which is effectively what it does. It's the
Yeah.
old guy with the hand. Okay, you guys Google Solemn Judgment, you get what I mean. It's the old guy with the yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. He's been Lambie Series. And we've been 8 Cubes. He's going to take us out now.
Alright guys, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.